I'm going to go over 6 different tips that you can use to calm your nerves before a game. Tip number 1 is acceptance. Now, I know that the whole point is us trying to reduce your nerves going into a game. So it may seem strange that we're going to start by trying to accept your nerves. The reason that you want to accept your nerves has to do with your focus. Whenever you are focusing on wanting to reduce your nerves in the moment, what do you normally tell yourself? Are you thinking things like, I wish I wasn't so nervous. I really need to stop being nervous right now. When I feel like this, I never play very well. If those are the thoughts that are going through your head when you are trying to reduce your nerves, that's only going to make the nervousness worse. So what we want to do first is accept that the nervousness is there. Because when we're working to reduce and manage nerves, it's all about shifting your focus from the nerves, from the thing that you're nervous about, so maybe not wanting to make mistakes, not wanting to play poorly, onto something else. And that's really what the remaining 5 tips are all about, is shifting that focus onto something else. But it has to start with acceptance. When you accept your nerves, this reduces resistance. It takes resistance away from the nervousness itself, and it also takes away resistance from the thing that you're nervous about, whether that is making mistakes, playing well in the game, or just whatever it might be. Now, the way that you actually accept your nervousness in the moment is through a conversation that you need to have with yourself. All you have to do is talk to yourself and say things like, all right, it's okay that I'm nervous. I accept the nervousness. I'm not going to worry about it. I've played well before, even though I was nervous, because I guarantee there have been times in the past where you felt nervousness before, but then you've still played well. So accepting nervousness is the first tip, and it's honestly the first step that I always use when I'm working with athletes on managing their nervousness before games. And to accept nervousness, you have to have that conversation with yourself. So the best way to kind of view this is as though you were having a conversation with somebody else, right? You were trying to talk down a teammate, or you were even trying to talk down a friend or a sibling who you knew was really nervous. You would say things like, it's okay that you're nervous, right? Just forget about the nervousness. You know that you can go out there and play well. You know that you're good enough. You got to trust in your skills. Because once again, what you're trying to do is accept the nervousness that you're feeling right now, in order to take the attention away from the nerves and take the resistance away from the nerves. Tip number 2 is prepare. Make sure that you are as prepared as possible. If you know that you are an athlete who is susceptible to getting overly nervous before games, to the point where maybe you even get a little anxious before games or during games, you have to make sure there is no stone left unturned when it comes to your preparation. This means you are prepared physically, and it also means you are prepared mentally. One of the best things for calming your nerves, calming your anxiety, is being prepared. But a lot of times when we are anxious, we won't be as prepared as possible, especially if you're feeling this nervousness and this anxiety days leading up to the game. Because if you're feeling really nervous about a game, it's tough to think about that game. You might want to just avoid it altogether, right? Try to do something else and not even think about the game that's about to happen, to where maybe you aren't putting as much attention as you need to into preparing for your opponent because you're really nervous about that opponent. And the more you think about them, the more nervous you get. But it would really be helpful for you maybe to do some research so you have a better game plan. And then you also know how you're going to face this opponent when you go and face them, to where you'll be more confident once it comes to game time. Or maybe you need to put more focus on preparing your skills, right? Fine-tuning your mechanics. But that's tough right now because you're so nervous about how you'll play that you're focusing on how the game will go instead of focusing on fine-tuning your mechanics. Or maybe you're so nervous that you're not doing too much mental preparation right now, because when you're not practicing, you just don't want to think about the game. You don't want to think about practice. You don't want to think about playing at all because it only makes you nervous. But when you know that you're going to be nervous for the game itself, even if you try to forget about it right now during the week or leading into the game, if you know that when the game happens, you're going to be feeling those nerves, then we don't want to try to avoid them at that point. We want to make sure that you are as prepared as possible. What you can do to help with preparation is make sure that you're doing everything you can physically. So you want to make sure you are practicing hard with your team. You want to make sure you are practicing hard on your own if you need to fine-tune any element of your game, any aspect of your mechanics. And then you also want to make sure you are resting enough, taking care of your body, getting the right nutrition, doing everything you possibly can to be prepared physically. The same thing is true for mental preparation. You want to make sure that you have a mental training plan in place to where you are preparing mentally for the game. You are going through breathing exercises. practices, you are doing some visualization to begin imagining yourself playing well. You want to make sure you are focusing on self-talk. You want to do any sort of mental preparation you can for preparing for the opponent, going through film, game planning. And then when it comes to the actual game, so the day of the game, you want to make sure you are preparing physically through your warm-up. And then you also want to make sure you are using a pre-game routine to get yourself prepared mentally for the game. But when you know that you have the tendency to get nervous and anxious before games, you have to make sure you are as prepared as possible. Tip number 3 is to remember past successes. This is something that you can do right before the game starts, and it honestly can be included in your pregame routine as part of your mental preparation. Before a game starts, when you're really nervous, what are you normally nervous about? Are you nervous about playing well, or are you more nervous about not wanting to make any mistakes? Most of the athletes I work with within one-on-one coaching, when they are experiencing intense nerves and anxiety, their focus is centered around not wanting to make mistakes. That's why they're nervous. They're nervous because they don't want to go out there and make mistakes, play badly, embarrass themselves, hurt the team, whatever it might be. When we know that you are nervous about mistakes, what that does is it puts your focus and your attention on mistakes happening. What we want to do is work on building your confidence. Something that's really going to counteract nerves before games and during games is being more confident in yourself. Something that helps you be more confident in yourself is remembering the times where you have succeeded in the past. Because confidence is built on a memory of success. The more you see yourself as successful, the more confident you'll be. That's why we want to be prepared, because when you're prepared, you trust yourself. So you trust that you can be successful that day. In addition to using preparation to increase confidence, you want to use your thinking in the moment to increase confidence. And that's where you can go through this practice where you remember some past successes. Just simply start reminding yourself of all the different times you've played well in the past. It doesn't even have to be recently. So let's say that you're in a slump right now and you just haven't been playing very well in your games recently. You can still think back to games you've played more in the distant past, right? Maybe even some practices that have been going very well. The main idea with this tip is before games, when you are nervous, once you've accepted the nervousness, we have to take your attention off of thoughts about you making mistakes and things that you don't want to have happen. And we need to fill your mind with images of you succeeding. The best way to do that is by remembering your past successes. Tip number 4 is to practice gratitude. Before the game, you can just remind yourself of why you're grateful to be able to play. What this is doing is taking your attention away from the future, which is what you'll be nervous about, and bringing it back into the present moment. Because when you practice gratitude, you are grateful of things that you have right now. You're grateful of the fact that you get to be out there and playing the game that you love. You're grateful to be out there with your teammates. You're grateful for such a beautiful day, right? You're grateful for competition, being able to compete, right? Getting that opportunity to go out there and show off your skills. You want to practice this gratitude because a grateful mind is not going to be an anxious mind. When you are in a state of gratitude, you can't simultaneously be nervous or anxious. The way that you practice this gratitude is pretty much just what I went through, where I was saying things like, I'm grateful to be out here, I'm grateful for my teammates, I'm grateful for the opportunity to play. To practice gratitude means that you are reminding yourself of reasons you have to be grateful. Now, if you want to make this more of an actionable process or more of a set routine that you can use, what you can do before games is actually write out maybe 5 to 10 things that you're grateful for before you actually get to the field or court. And then when you are at the field or court and you do feel the nerves taking over, just start reminding yourself of those things that you are grateful for. And when you do remind yourself of those things that you're grateful for and you think about them, don't just think about them, but try to feel that gratitude as well, right? Feel thankful for all the things that you're thinking of that you have to be grateful for at that moment. Tip number 5 is to focus on your breathing. Whenever you're really nervous, it's natural to have shallow breathing take place because we start to get nervous, our heart starts to race, we start to get anxious, and we're not focusing on taking nice, deep breaths. Now, I'm sure as an athlete, you've heard people say, take some deep breaths when you're nervous. And that's great advice, right? What we're going to do here, though, is we're going to take it a step farther, and we're going to say use count breathing to not only take deep breaths to help calm yourself down physically, but by focusing on the counting, you can also calm yourself down mentally. We're going to start slowing your thinking down to where you're not having so many racing thoughts about the future. You focus more in the present moment at that point. So what you can do is use count breathing, where you breathe in for a certain number. Let's say you breathe in for a count of 4. and then you breathe out nice and slowly for a count of 8. As you exhale, you want to do this slowly, right? Nice and slow and controlled breathing. And you can do this over and over again. A great time to use count breathing before games is whenever you are warming up. So if you're stretching with the team or you're doing some warming up on your own, focus on some count breathing. And then another time where I've had a lot of success with athletes using count breathing before games is during the national anthem, right? Or maybe during when the lineups are being called, because that's a time of inactivity where you're not warming up anymore and the game's not actually starting. So that's the point where it's really easy to have your mind start to become overactive and you start to think about all the things that could go wrong. So at that point, just turn your attention onto your breathing, take those nice deep breaths, and focus on the counting. And then tip number 6 is to choose a focus point. This is also known as setting process goals. So back in the very first tip, right, with tip number 1, I said that you want to focus on acceptance. The reason I said that you want to focus on acceptance is because when it comes to reducing nervousness and anxiety going into games, it all has to do with your attention. We want to take your attention off of the future, off of those worries, off of the mistakes that you don't want to have happen, and bring your attention back into the present moment and put it on something that will be more helpful for you to think about, even if that is something in the past, but in the form of those past successes. So with this last tip, choosing a focus point, this gives you something to focus on as you go into the game instead of thinking about what you don't want to have happen or the mistakes that you don't want to make. And now a focus point, like I said, is also known as a process goal, because what a process goal is a goal that you set for yourself that is controllable and a part of the process of your game. So let's say that you have the goal to play your best that day and make no mistakes. If you focus solely on that, we're going to see nervousness increase because you're thinking about the future and the result of the game. However, if you say my outcome goal is to play really well, play my best, make no mistakes, and then you ask yourself, what do I actually need to focus on that's controllable to help myself play my best? And then you landed on the focus point or the process goal of giving full effort and focusing on having a good attitude throughout the game. Now you have something more controllable to put your attention onto. So as the game goes forward, right, and it moves forward, you want to focus on giving full effort. So that's something you can focus on. And then you also want to focus on having a good attitude. So no matter what happens, whether you make a mistake, the other team scores, your team's doing really well or doing really poorly, you want to focus on having a good attitude. You see how that's different than focusing on what you don't want to have happen or focusing on really wanting to play well? Instead, you're actually focusing on things that at that moment you can control, because you can control full effort and you can control having a good attitude, just like you can control any other controllable process goal that you set for yourself. So those are 6 tips that you can follow to help reduce your nervousness going into games. So in summary, it's acceptance. Make sure that you are prepared, remember past successes, practice gratitude, focus on your breathing, and then also give yourself a focus point or a process goal. If you have any questions about this video or would like me to cover any other sports psychology topic, please let me know in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. I put out new videos each week on sports psychology and mental training.